The moment I saw my bank account balance, I knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. $0, 0 cents. 8 years of sacrifice, erased overnight. But I didn't understand the full scope of the theft until 3 days later, standing in my parents' dining room, watching my sister Rachel toast her entrepreneurial journey with champagne that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "I'm so grateful for this opportunity," she announced, her voice carrying that practiced confidence of someone who'd never had to choose between gas money and dinner. $85,000 in seed funding. It's changed everything. My tech startup launches next month. The room erupted. 37 relatives applauding, phones emerging to document this triumph, my father's voice booming with pride I'd been chasing since childhood but never quite caught. "That's my girl." Always knew Rachel had the vision to build something real. I stood frozen against the wall, my hands clenched so tight my nails drew blood. Because that $85,000 wasn't venture capital or investment money or family loans. It was mine, every single dollar. 8 years teaching English to teenagers who didn't care about Fitzgerald. 8 years of weekend tutoring sessions at $75 an hour. 8 years of summer school and SAT prep and choosing ramen over restaurants so I could build something that mattered. My startup fund, my business plan, my future, stolen through access to accounts I'd trusted family to never touch, rebranded as Rachel's entrepreneurial genius, while I watched from the shadows where I'd been standing my entire life. My mother squeezed Rachel's shoulder with pride she'd never shown when I'd gotten my master's degree. "We always knew you'd do something special." They had no idea what was coming, because if Rachel thought she could steal 8 years of my life and get celebrated for it, she'd drastically underestimated the wrong sister. My name is Clara Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 8 years I've been living 2 lives, the visible one where I teach high school English in Queens, and the invisible one where I built something my family would never expect from their quiet daughter. Teacher by day, hustler by night. While Rachel was climbing corporate ladders and posting LinkedIn updates about her latest promotion, I was grinding in silence, building a future nobody bothered to ask about because they'd already decided I wasn't the daughter worth watching. Picture my classroom at Jefferson High, 32 desks bolted to floors that hadn't been refinished since the Clinton administration. A chalkboard permanently stained with chalk dust no amount of cleaning could erase, and teenagers who thought Shakespeare was a rapper they'd never heard of. My annual salary, $47,000, which sounds decent until you subtract taxes, student loan payments, and the cost of living in a city that treats 50 grand like poverty with a diploma. But that classroom was just the foundation. The real construction happened in the margins of my life. In the hours most people spend watching Netflix or going on dates or doing things that make you feel human, instead of like a machine designed to convert time into money. Weekend tutoring sessions in Forest Hills kitchens that smelled like expensive takeout and parental anxiety. $75 an hour to teach standardized test strategies to kids whose college applications would be written by professionals while I was still paying off my own student debt. Summer school contracts that turned July and August into extended work years while my friends posted beach photos, and Rachel vacationed in places that required passports and reminded me I'd chosen savings over experiences. SAT prep courses on Wednesday nights. Teaching 17-year-olds how to game a system that would determine their futures, based on multiple-choice questions and essay prompts about courage or integrity, or whatever abstract concept the College Board decided mattered that year. My refrigerator became a gallery of post-it note discipline. Save $200 this month. No Starbucks until Friday. Tutoring money goes straight to savings. Each yellow square a small promise to a future I was building in secret because I'd learned early that announcing plans in my family just invited comparison to Rachel's more impressive ones. Late nights, my phone glowing in the dark of my studio apartment, the banking app open to a screen I'd refresh obsessively like it was social media, watching the number climb, $12,847, $28,356 $51,203 $67,890. Each milestone feeling like climbing a mountain one pebble at a time, but I could see the summit getting closer. The family dynamics had crystallized into roles we'd all accepted. Dad, Michael Brooks, a man who measured love in salary figures and LinkedIn endorsements, who could tell you his daughter's annual income down to the dollar but couldn't tell you their favorite books or biggest fears. Mom, Jennifer, soft-spoken to the point of invisibility, who'd perfected the art of agreeing with whoever spoke loudest. She'd nod along to Dad's pronouncements about which daughter was succeeding and which was finding her way, which was family code for disappointing us quietly. Rachel, 3 years younger but decades ahead in the race for parental pride. Marketing executive at a tech firm in Manhattan. The kind of job that sounds impressive at dinner parties and comes with benefits packages that include things like unlimited PTO and equity options that I'd never quite understood but knew meant she was winning at capitalism. And me, the quiet one, the one who'd learned to make herself small because taking up space in the Brooks family required achievements loud enough to compete with Rachel's carefully curated success story. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday gathering followed the same script. Rachel would arrive with stories about her latest promotion or client acquisition or team she was now managing. Dad would beam with the pride of a man whose investment had paid dividends. Mom would squeeze Rachel's hand and say things like, "We always knew you'd do something special." My achievements, getting tenure, earning my master's degree, publishing an essay about teaching in an education journal, were acknowledged with the enthusiasm people reserve for commenting on the weather. "That's nice, honey," Mom would say, already turning her attention back to Rachel's more impressive updates. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. That external validation was meaningless compared to the satisfaction of building something real, something that belonged entirely to me. That one day when my business launched, when my startup became profitable, when I could point to something tangible and say I built this, that's when they'd finally see me. The business plan had been developing for 3 years. An educational technology platform that would connect underserved students with quality tutoring at prices their families could afford, funded by premium pricing for wealthy families who could pay more. Social impact meets sustainable business model, the kind of venture that could scale nationally if I could just get the initial funding to build the prototype and hire the first few developers. $85,000. That's what I'd calculated I needed for a minimal viable product. Enough runway to test the platform, enough cushion to survive the inevitable early mistakes. It had taken 8 years to save that amount, but I'd finally hit the target in October 2023. The banking app on my phone showed $85,347.82, slightly more than my goal because I'd picked up extra tutoring sessions in September and hadn't had time to spend any of it. I'd stared at that number for 20 minutes the night I crossed the threshold, sitting on my futon couch hybrid in the apartment that still smelled faintly like the Thai restaurant downstairs, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with vindication. This was my proof. Evidence that the quiet daughter, the underestimated one, the sister who'd been living in Rachel's shadow since childhood, had built something significant without anyone's help or recognition or approval. I'd believed, naively, stupidly, desperately, that when I finally launched this business, when I could show my family what I'd been working toward all these years, they'd finally see me as something other than Rachel's less impressive sister. I'd imagine the moment I'd tell them, the surprise on their faces, the realization that I'd been building something real while they'd been busy celebrating Rachel's corporate ascent, the acknowledgement that maybe, possibly, both daughters could be successful in different ways. What I didn't imagine was opening my banking app 3 weeks later to find a balance of $0. What I couldn't have predicted was standing in my parents' dining room, watching Rachel toast her new startup, funded by $85,000 she was claiming as her own entrepreneurial achievement. What I'd never considered was the possibility that the people I'd been trying to impress would steal my future and celebrate it as someone else's triumph. But that's exactly what happened. The $85,000 wasn't for vacations in Santorini or designer handbags that cost more than my monthly rent. It wasn't even for the kind of comfortable life Rachel had been living since her first corporate bonus. It was for something that mattered more than comfort. A dream I'd been developing for 3 years, refining through late nights and weekends, when other people my age were on dating apps or binge-watching Netflix. BridgeLearn, that's what I was calling it, a tutoring technology platform designed to connect underserved students with quality educational support at prices their families could actually afford, subsidized by premium pricing for wealthy families who could pay more. Social impact meets sustainable business model. The kind of venture that could scale nationally, if I could just get past the initial launch phase, if I could build the prototype that would prove the concept worked, if I could transform 3 years of planning into something real. My studio apartment had become a shrine to this dream. One entire wall covered in sticky notes: yellow for features, pink for potential problems, blue for marketing strategies. Each square representing hours of research, conversations with other teachers, feedback from parents whose kids I'd tutored. Matching algorithm based on learning style, not just subject area. Pay what you can sliding scale for families under 200% poverty line. Video tutorials for common homework struggles. Real-time progress tracking parents can actually understand. My coffee table was buried under drafts of the business plan, each version marked with notes in different colored pens, coffee rings, staining pages where I'd worked through financial projections until 3 a.m. Revenue models, user acquisition costs, customer lifetime value, terms I'd taught myself through YouTube videos and library books because business school was another expense I couldn't afford. The prototype logo glowed on my laptop screen during those late nights when the city outside my window had finally gone quiet and I could focus on building instead of surviving. Simple, clean design, a bridge made of pencils connecting two shores, one labeled struggle and one labeled success. Cheesy maybe, but it captured what I was trying to do. I'd hired a developer on Fiverr to build a basic working model, paying him in installments from my tutoring money. $3,000 for something that would let me demonstrate the concept to potential investors, to show that this wasn't just a teacher's fantasy, but a viable business that could actually help kids while generating revenue. The night Rachel came over, I was deep in spreadsheet hell, trying to project user growth rates based on comparable education startups. My apartment looked like a tornado had hit a library, papers everywhere, my futon pulled out into bed mode, because I'd been too tired to fold it back into couch formation. Takeout containers from 3 different meals scattered across surfaces. She'd texted that afternoon, "Can I come by tonight? Want to catch up? Haven't seen you in forever." I should have been suspicious. Rachel didn't do casual sister visits. Her time was valuable, her calendar managed in 15-minute increments, her social life curated for maximum networking potential. But I was lonely, exhausted from 8 years of grinding in isolation, and stupid enough to think that maybe she actually wanted to connect. She arrived with wine, a bottle that probably cost what I spent on groceries in a week, wearing athleisure that looked effortless but definitely wasn't. The kind of outfit that said I just threw this on while actually meaning I spent $200 at Lululemon. "Wow, Clara," she said, taking in my wall of sticky notes and scattered papers. "This is a lot. What exactly are you working on?" Pride mixed with caution as I explained BridgeLearn. The problem it solved, the market it served, the business model that made it sustainable. I showed her my spreadsheets, my prototype designs, my carefully researched competitive analysis. She sipped her wine and asked questions that seemed genuinely curious. How would the matching algorithm work? What's the customer acquisition cost? Have you validated demand with potential users? Good questions, smart questions, the kind that made me think she was actually interested in helping me refine the concept. I didn't realize she was taking notes on her phone under the guise of checking messages. I didn't see her photographing my sticky note wall when I went to the bathroom. I didn't understand that her curiosity was reconnaissance, that every question was designed to extract maximum information about a concept she was already planning to claim as her own. "This is really impressive, Clara," she said as she left 2 hours later, giving me a hug that felt genuine enough that I almost cried from the simple act of being seen by someone in my family. "You should be proud of yourself. This could really be something." Could be something. Future tense. Like it wasn't already something. Like the 3 years of development and 8 years of funding weren't already proof of concept. But I was too grateful for the attention to notice the warning signs. Too starved for family recognition to see that she wasn't celebrating my dream. She was appraising it, determining its value, calculating whether it was worth stealing. 3 weeks later, I opened my banking app to check my balance before transferring money to pay the developer for the next phase of prototype development. Ling Meiyuan. For a moment, I thought it was a glitch. Banks make mistakes, systems have errors. Surely there was some explanation for why $85,000 had vanished overnight. I called Chase's fraud department, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The representative's voice was professionally sympathetic, as she explained that the transfer had been authorized through my account, moved to another account at a different bank, all the security protocols properly followed. "Who authorized it?" I asked. my voice breaking on the question I already knew the answer to. The transfer was initiated through your online banking portal, ma'am. The recipient account is listed as Rachel Brooks. The room tilted, my vision blurred at the edges. Somewhere in my chest, something fundamental was breaking. Not just my heart, but my ability to trust, to believe that family meant protection instead of predation. Rachel had accessed my account. Maybe I'd left my laptop open during her visit. Maybe she'd watched me type my password at some point over the years. Maybe she'd found my notebook where I'd written it down in case I ever forgot. However she'd done it, the result was the same. 8 years of my life, transferred to her account with a few clicks, my startup dreams stolen before I'd even had the chance to launch it. I sat on my futon couch hybrid, staring at that $0 balance until the numbers burned into my retinas, understanding with perfect clarity that I'd guarded my dream like a secret garden, but had never imagined my own sister would pick the lock and strip it bare. The wall of sticky notes that had represented hope now looked like evidence of naivety. Every coffee-stained business plan, every late-night spreadsheet, every carefully researched feature, all of it had become the blueprint for someone else's success story. 3 days after discovering my empty bank account, I got the text from Mom. Family celebration, dinner, Saturday, 6 p.m. Rachel has big news. Don't be late. I should have known. I should have connected the theft to the celebration, should have realized that my missing $85,000 and Rachel's big news weren't coincidental events happening in parallel universes. But grief makes you stupid. And I was grieving, not just the money, but the dream it represented, the 8 years of sacrifice it contained, the future it was supposed to fund. My parents' backyard looked like something from a magazine spread about successful families celebrating successful children. Fairy lights strung between trees that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Catering from that Italian place in Garden City that charges $40 for pasta. White tablecloths and real glassware instead of the paper plates we'd used for my master's degree celebration. 37 relatives filled folding chairs arranged in neat rows facing a small platform where Rachel stood like she was about to deliver a TED Talk instead of a family announcement. She wore a dress that probably had a designer name I wouldn't recognize, her hair professionally styled in a way that suggested she'd spent the morning in a salon while I'd been teaching teenagers about dangling modifiers. I arrived late, slipping into a seat in the back row next to a cousin whose name I could never remember, my hands shaking as I tried to pour water from the pitcher on the table without spilling. Dad stood up first, his voice carrying that boom of patriarchal pride that had defined every major family moment. We're here tonight to celebrate something extraordinary. My daughter Rachel has done something I always knew she would. She's become an entrepreneur. The applause started before he even finished the sentence, relatives already celebrating an achievement they didn't understand yet. Their enthusiasm fueled by Dad's approval more than any actual knowledge of what Rachel had accomplished. Rachel has secured $85,000 in startup funding, Dad continued, and my water glass slipped from my hand, hitting the table with a sound that nobody heard over the increased applause. And she's launching a tech platform that's going to revolutionize education for underserved communities. The world tilted sideways. The fairy lights blurred into streaks of painful brightness. My chest felt like someone had reached in and removed my lungs, leaving a cavity that couldn't quite remember how breathing worked. $85,000. My exact amount, down to the last cent. Education platform. My concept, my mission, my 3 years of development. Underserved communities. My passion, born from 8 years of teaching kids who deserved better than what the system was giving them. Rachel stepped forward, holding a glass of champagne that caught the fairy lights and threw patterns across faces that were all turned toward her, captivated by her confidence, her polish, her ability to command attention I'd never been able to capture. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice steady and practiced. I've been working on this project for months now, and I'm so excited to finally share it with my family. Months. She said months like she'd been developing this concept, like the sticky notes on my wall and the coffee-stained business plans, and the late nights of financial modeling were hers instead of mine. BridgeLearn is a tutoring technology platform designed to connect students who need help with qualified educators who can provide it, she continued, and I watched my own words come out of her mouth, my mission statement delivered with her confidence, my dream repackaged as her entrepreneurial vision. She clicked through a presentation on a laptop connected to a projector someone had set up, my logo design, my matching algorithm description, my pay what you can pricing model, all of it presented as evidence of her innovation rather than her theft. The platform uses a proprietary matching algorithm based on learning styles, not just subject areas, she explained, and I remembered typing those exact words at 2 a.m., remembered researching learning style frameworks, remembered the excitement of figuring out how to code preferences into searchable criteria. Mom was crying, actual tears streaming down her face as she watched Rachel present stolen concepts as original innovations. We always knew she had it in her, she whispered to the aunt sitting next to her, loud enough for me to hear from my back row seat. She's always been so creative, so driven. Creative, driven. Words they'd never used to describe me, applied to Rachel for presenting work she'd stolen from the daughter they'd never bothered to see. The presentation continued for 20 minutes. User acquisition strategies I'd researched, revenue models I'd calculated, competitive advantages I'd identified through months of market analysis. Every slide was mine, every concept stolen, every achievement claimed by someone who'd done nothing but memorize my work and access my bank account. When Rachel finished, the applause was deafening. Relatives stood up, phones emerging to document this triumph, voices calling out congratulations and questions about when they could invest, when the platform would launch, whether she needed advisors or board members. Dad raised his glass in a toast that felt like a public execution. To Rachel, a true entrepreneur who's going to change the world. This is what real success looks like. Real success. As opposed to my 8 years of teaching, my master's degree, my publications, my tenure, all apparently examples of fake success. Participation trophies for the daughter who didn't quite measure up. Then Dad's eyes found me in the back row, and something in his expression shifted, not quite pity, not quite disappointment, but some mixture that suggested he was about to deliver a lesson he thought I needed to learn. Clara, he said, his voice cutting through the celebration like a knife through silk, you should take notes from your sister. This is what it looks like when someone stops making excuses and starts making things happen. The backyard went silent. 37 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for my response, expecting me to smile and nod, and accept the comparison gracefully like I'd been doing my entire life. But I couldn't smile, couldn't nod, couldn't pretend that watching my sister steal my life's work and get celebrated for it was a learning experience rather than a crime. I stood up, my chair scraping against concrete that suddenly felt unsteady beneath my feet. The fairy lights that had looked magical moments earlier now seemed garish, overlit, exposing every crack in the family facade we'd been maintaining for decades. That's not her vision, I said, my voice shaking but audible. That's mine. Every word she just presented, every concept, every piece of that platform, I built it. She stole it. The silence that followed was different from the earlier applause. This was the shocked quiet of people watching a script deviate from its expected ending, of relatives who'd come for a celebration and found themselves witnessing a confrontation. Rachel's face went pale, then red, then settled into an expression of injured innocence that she'd probably practiced. Clara, what are you talking about? You're being dramatic. The $85,000, I continued, my hands clenched so tight my nails drew blood. Where did you get it, Rachel? Because 3 days ago, my savings account, the one with $85,000 I'd saved over 8 years, was emptied, transferred to your account. And now you're claiming you secured funding for a startup that uses my business plan, my logo design, my research. Mom stood up, her face wearing the expression of someone trying to stop a car accident they can see coming but can't prevent. Clara, sweetheart, maybe we should talk about this privately. No, I said, the word coming out harder than I'd intended. I've been quiet my entire life. I've accepted being overlooked, being compared, being treated like the daughter whose achievements don't quite measure up to Rachel's. But I won't be quiet while she steals my work and gets celebrated for it. The backyard that had been filled with celebration minutes earlier now felt like a courtroom where I was both prosecutor and defendant, accuser and accused, the person trying to expose truth, and the person being judged for disrupting peace. Dad's face had gone from proud to angry, his expression carrying the weight of a man whose perfect family narrative was being challenged. Clara, this is inappropriate. We're here to celebrate your sister's achievement. Her theft, I corrected. You're here to celebrate her theft. Of my money, my concept, my 3 years of work. And you're doing it while telling me I should take notes on what real success looks like. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, most of them variations on the same theme. You embarrassed the family. Why would you accuse your sister like that? You need to apologize. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one message acknowledged that maybe, possibly, having your life's work stolen and celebrated deserved more concern than disrupting a backyard party. I deleted them all and called a lawyer. Sarah Chen's office in Manhattan was smaller than I'd expected. No mahogany furniture or floor-to-ceiling windows, just functional space filled with case files and the particular energy of someone who'd spent decades fighting battles other people were too tired to wage. "Show me everything," she said, skipping pleasantries for pragmatism I desperately needed. I spread 8 years of documentation across her desk. Bank statements showing my deposits, transaction records proving the unauthorized transfer, or emails where I'd discussed BridgeLearn with the Fiverr developer months before Rachel's announcement, my business plan with metadata showing creation dates, screenshots of my sticky note wall with timestamps. Sarah studied the evidence with the focus of someone evaluating a crime scene, her expression shifting from professional interest to genuine anger as she connected the dots. "This is wire fraud," she said finally. "Unauthorized access to your account, transfer of funds without consent, using stolen intellectual property for financial gain. We can file criminal charges and a civil suit." Criminal charges. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't started but was about to fan into an inferno. "How long will it take?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be measured in years rather than weeks. 18 months minimum. Maybe longer if she fights it. "And Clara?" Sarah leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of experience delivering news people didn't want to hear. "Even if you win, you might not get your money back. If she's already spent it on this startup launch, recovery gets complicated. The money might be gone, but the idea, the knowledge, the 3 years of development work stored in my head and my files, that was something Rachel couldn't steal even with access to my bank account." I left Sarah's office with a retainer agreement signed and a timeline that felt impossibly long but unavoidable. Legal justice moved slowly. But I didn't have to wait for courts to start rebuilding what had been stolen. My programmer friend Marcus agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Astoria, away from my apartment where Rachel had memorized my work, away from my family who'd celebrated her theft. His laptop sat open on the table between us, code scrolling across the screen like a language I was learning to read. "I can't afford to pay you what this is worth," I admitted, my bank account still showing that devastating $0 balance. "Then pay me in equity," Marcus said, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. 10% of BridgeLearn when it launches. I believe in what you're building, Clara, and I believe in you." Equity. Partnership. Someone who saw value in my vision without needing bank statements to prove it existed. We rebuilt the prototype from scratch. Different code, improved interface, better matching algorithm based on 6 months of additional research I'd done since Rachel had stolen the original version. Every line of code was documented, time-stamped, backed up in 3 locations because I'd learned the hard way that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. The networking events felt like walking into rooms where everyone knew a version of events that wasn't true. I'd show up to tech meetups and education conferences, pitching BridgeLearn to potential investors while knowing that somewhere in the city, Rachel was probably doing the same thing with my stolen concept. "How's this different from other tutoring platforms?" an investor would ask, and I'd explain the sliding scale pricing model, the learning style matching, the focus on underserved communities, knowing that Rachel was probably giving the same pitch with more polish and less authenticity. But I had something she didn't: the ability to answer technical questions about the platform's development, to explain the pedagogical theory behind the matching algorithm, to discuss challenges I'd already solved and problems I was still working through. Rachel could present stolen slides, but she couldn't think like an educator because she'd never spent 8 years in classrooms watching kids struggle with systems that weren't designed for their success. Late nights, I'd sit in my apartment with my journal open, writing words that felt like promises I was making to myself. I won't let her name replace mine. I won't let their celebration become the final chapter. I won't disappear because they chose not to see me. The breakthrough came 4 months after the confrontation, at an education technology conference in Brooklyn. I was sitting in on a panel about equitable access to tutoring when someone mentioned Rachel's name. She's launching an interesting platform, though the execution seems shaky. Great marketing, but the actual product doesn't match the promise. My heart hammered against my ribs. Rachel had launched using my stolen money and stolen concept, but she didn't have my knowledge, couldn't answer the hard questions, couldn't iterate on problems because she didn't understand the foundational theory. She'd stolen my work, but she couldn't steal my expertise. And in the education technology world, expertise mattered more than polish. After the panel, 3 investors approached me. They'd heard about that other tutoring platform but were concerned about the founder's lack of educational background. When I explained my 8 years of teaching experience, my master's in education, my direct understanding of the problems BridgeLearn was designed to solve, their expressions shifted from polite interest to genuine excitement. "This is what we've been looking for," one of them said. "Someone who actually understands education, not just tech." 1 meeting turned into 3. 3 meetings turned into term sheets. By month 6 of my legal battle, I had secured $60,000 in seed funding from investors who chose substance over stolen slides. Not $85,000, not my full dream budget, but enough to launch a real beta, to test with actual students, to prove that BridgeLearn worked not because of marketing polish but because it was built by someone who'd spent years watching kids struggle and developing solutions that actually helped. The fund was gone, probably spent on Rachel's launch campaign that prioritized appearance over functionality. But the idea, the real, deep understanding of what students needed and how to provide it, that lived in my head, in my experience, in my 8 years of classroom work, that Rachel could never replicate. She could steal my money, she could present my slides, she could even fool my family into celebrating her theft. But she couldn't steal my knowledge, couldn't fake my expertise, couldn't replicate the years of work that had taught me not just what to build, but why it mattered and how to make it actually work. This wasn't just about reclaiming stolen funds or exposing family betrayal. This was about proving that I existed, that my work mattered, that the daughter they'd overlooked had built something valuable that deserved recognition on its own terms. I was fighting for my name, for my voice, for my worth in a family that had spent 34 years telling me I didn't quite measure up. 9 months after the confrontation, I got another invitation to my parents' house. "Family gathering," the text said. "Rachel has updates on the startup." This time, I didn't arrive empty-handed. The backyard looked exactly as it had before. Same fairy lights, same catered food, same relatives filling chairs with the same expectations of celebrating Rachel's success. She stood near the makeshift stage wearing designer silk that probably cost more than my monthly rent, champagne glass catching light like she was posing for a magazine cover about young entrepreneurs. Dad was mid-toast when I walked through the gate, my messenger bag heavy with documents that would rewrite the narrative they'd been telling for 9 months. "And Rachel's platform has already gained significant traction," he was saying, his voice carrying that familiar boom of paternal pride. "This is what happens when you combine vision with execution." I set my bag on an empty table with enough force that conversations near me stopped, attention shifting from Dad's toast to the daughter who'd been written out of this story. "I need to interrupt," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The backyard went quiet. Rachel's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Mom's expression shifted from celebration to concern, recognizing the tone I'd used at the last gathering, the one that had ended with accusations instead of applause. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, documents organized with the precision of someone who'd spent months building a legal case, bank statements with my name showing 8 years of deposits, business plans with metadata proving creation dates, email chains with developers discussing technical features, LLC registration papers with my signature from 6 months ago. "You crowned the wrong daughter," I said, placing each document on the table like evidence in a trial where I was finally allowed to be the prosecutor. "This fund, the $85,000 Rachel claimed she secured, I built that. Dollar by dollar, tutoring session by tutoring session, 8 years of my life." I spread the business plans across white tablecloths that had been set for celebration. This vision, the platform Rachel presented as her innovation, I developed that. 3 years of research, development, testing, my concept, my work, my name on every original document. Rachel's face had gone pale, her designer confidence cracking like ice under pressure. "Clara, this is neither the time nor..." The place? I cut her off. When is the right time? When you've spent all my money? When you've built an entire company on my stolen work? When our family has celebrated your theft enough times that everyone forgets where it came from? I turned to face Dad directly, holding up the bank transfer records that Sarah had obtained through legal channels. You said this is what real success looks like. But success built on theft isn't success. It's fraud. Wire fraud, to be specific. That's what my lawyer calls unauthorized access to someone's account and transfer of funds without consent. The silence that followed was absolute. No one reaching for champagne, no phones emerging to document this moment, no applause to fill the space between truth and family fiction. Mom's eyes dropped first, unable to meet mine, her face carrying the weight of 9 months, spent celebrating the wrong daughter's achievement, while ignoring the right daughter's theft. Dad's toast shattered in his hand, not literally, but the authority that had always defined his pronouncements seemed to dissolve in the face of documentation he couldn't dismiss or reframe. And Rachel, the sister who'd stolen my dream and worn it like a designer dress, stood frozen with her mask finally slipping, revealing not the confident entrepreneur but someone who'd confused access to someone else's work with actual capability. I filed legal action 4 months ago, I continued, my voice gaining strength from finally speaking truth that had been buried under their celebration. The case is ongoing. But more importantly, I've rebuilt what you stole. My version of BridgeLearn launched last month with actual seed funding from investors who believe in substance over stolen slides. I picked up my messenger bag, the weight of my pitch deck inside feeling less like burden and more like promise. I'm the real entrepreneur. I always was. You just weren't looking. Walking out of that backyard felt different than the first time. No wine glass slipping from my hand, no world tilting sideways. Just steady steps toward a future I'd rebuilt from the ashes of their betrayal, toward a business that had my name on it legally, morally, actually. The city lights reflected in my eyes as I headed toward the subway, not running away from confrontation but walking toward the life I'd earned through expertise they couldn't steal and determination they'd underestimated. They took my money, they crowned the wrong daughter, they celebrated theft while calling it entrepreneurship. But they couldn't erase the truth. And the truth was always this. I was the architect of the dream they'd tried to steal, the knowledge they couldn't replicate, the entrepreneur they'd refused to see until she forced them to look. And now I was building an empire with my name on it, funded by people who recognized real vision when they saw it. The invisible daughter wasn't invisible anymore. She was unstoppable. If Clara's story hit you in the chest, if you've ever had a family member take credit for your work, if you've ever built something in silence only to watch someone else get celebrated for it, you understand why this story needed to be told. Hit that like button if you've ever been the overlooked sibling whose achievements got acknowledged with silence while someone else's got champagne toasts. Subscribe and turn on notifications because next week we're sharing Marcus's story, a man who spent 6 years building a business with his brother, only to be cut out the day before the company sold for 7 figures. His response will restore your faith that documentation beats betrayal. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that having your work stolen doesn't define your worth, rebuilding it does. Comment below. Have you ever had a family member take credit for your ideas or achievements? What was the moment you decided to stop staying quiet? Your invisible work isn't worthless. It's just waiting for the right people to see it. And sometimes those people aren't your family. They're the investors, partners, and allies who recognize real vision when they see it.